Hello and welcome back to my channel and a Sims 2 speed build. So I am starting a new Uberhood. I'm aware that if you've been around a while, that's probably not great news, but I will explain why later in this video. I've got quite a lot to say. Still not quite sure how I'm going to say stuff, but we'll figure it out. In this speed build, this is me building some apartments for the university graduates to move into, because obviously they don't have a whole lot of money when they move out of university. So I wanted to make some somewhat cheap apartments, but also ones with enough bedrooms to keep the bigger households together. This is my third Uberhood now on this channel, and in my last one I did make apartments and they were really bad because I made a lot of communal areas including bathrooms and they were constantly clogged. Sims were constantly unable to use the bathrooms. I hadn't factored in the fact that when Sims started to have children that they wouldn't be able to shower in communal showers when there are adults around, which, you know, is fair, but it just wasn't something I thought about. And so Sims were just constantly peeing themselves. They were constantly stinky. They could never get in the bathroom, and when they did get in the bathroom they socialized with other people and clogged up the bathroom. They weren't very big. There wasn't really a room inside each apartment to expand, you know, buy hobby items or have children. You know, the goal is that obviously when we first move them into the apartments they will be ex-university households, they'll be roommates, but over time they will partner up and potentially have children and they'll become family apartments. So I built some apartments differently this time. There is a small communal area at the back. There's like a little patio garden area, but for the most part everything is contained within each apartment. They've got all their own bathrooms, they've got bedrooms, they've got large living spaces so that they can buy skill items and stuff. The only thing I planned on doing differently that I didn't is I had planned to make each apartment different, and I haven't, because it took me long enough to figure out a layout for the apartments at all, let alone figuring out 19 different ones or however many university households there are. So they are all very similar, obviously with varying amounts of bathrooms and bedrooms, but other than that they're identical. And I just figure that over time, as the households become families and put their own stamp on it, buy their own skill items, decorate to their own preferences or whatever, they will become different. Clearly they'll have the same general layout, but they'll look a bit different over time. But to begin with, the apartments all still look the same, but hopefully they'll be more functional than the last Uberhood. Speaking of which, I know it's not great that I'm starting again so soon, because it was less than a year ago I started the last one. It was only May, but I want to go into detail a little bit about why I'm restarting again because this is my third Uberhood now in as many years, and I am quite anxious about restarting because I know there are a few of you here who've been here for a very long time, and I really am so appreciative of that. And I don't feel great about posting the same thing over and over again, just posting the same few families and then restarting and posting the same few families and then restarting again. And to begin with, it's going to be the same few families. So I did try to push on with my last one, but I just couldn't do it anymore. I was getting to a point where I was just going, you know what, I'm just going to quit YouTube. And I'm like, well, I don't want to do that. I just didn't want to play that Uberhood anymore. So I suppose content warning for probably the rest of this video, going to be talking a lot about my experiences over the last couple of years, because I feel like it is relevant when it comes to the Uberhood, because I've had some extended breaks from this channel. A lot has gone on. So I suppose a warning, I don't know exactly what I'm going to get into yet. I'll put up a text piece on the screen for when I'm editing and I know what I'm actually saying, but it's going to be mental health related stuff, probably talking a bit about suicide, potentially eating disorders, anything mental health related. And I feel like it's such a strong word and I still don't know whether this word applies yet or not. But just to cover all bases so that I don't accidentally trigger anybody, potentially like emotional abuse, even though I don't know if I am entitled to use that word or not. Oh, and death. We'll be talking a bit about death, I expect. So I spent last week about 3 hours writing notes for this video, and I don't feel like I can use any of them, and it's such a difficult thing to talk about because so much happened and it's so convoluted and so confusing, and it's very difficult not to just go right back to the day I was born to explain everything that's happened, because it feels relevant, but I'm going to try and brush past it. I suppose quick bit of background, I'm autistic, I'm still getting used to that, but I didn't find that out until about 5 months ago, maybe even 4 months ago. October, what are we now, March? 4.5 months ago, end of October, although I've known it for a few years now, but I did not know it at the beginning of what I'm about to tell you. So I was picked up by mental health services when I was 15. Oh yeah, also content warning, self-harm, because I was self-harming. And for the next 10 plus years, that has been the narrative, is Sammy is mentally ill, Sammy is depressed, Sammy is anxious, and it's all mental illness, right? And so you blame all of your problems on mental illness because that's what you've been told by so many people. So I was in and out of the system from 2011 till about 2017, and then I tried to figure out on my own, and I couldn't. I tried to get into routine, I tried to look after myself better, I tried to find work, I couldn't do any of it, and naturally I went, well, this is clearly the mental illness, I should probably get help. And that's what I did. 2020, I went to the doctor, said I needed some mental health support. I didn't actually feel bad at this point, I just couldn't function. I was trying to do some freelancing work, I couldn't really keep it up, but I was pushing and pushing and pushing and trying really hard to do it and be a normal person, and I couldn't do it, and so I assumed this is the mental illness, even though I felt okay. So I went to the GP, said I need some mental health support, put me on a waiting list, and I waited for 2.5 years. Now in 2021, I had a meeting with a psychiatrist who mentioned that I might be autistic, and that's sort of the first I heard about that. And then in 2022, and I sort of talked about this a little bit in probably my last speed build now, I'm not sure if I've done any speed builds since, but it was a Sims 4 speed build where I was building a house in Copperdale, or whatever that world's called. It was just as the high school years pack came out, and I made a speed build there, and I talked a little bit about what I'm about to say now, which is Plumbella that year released a video about her autism, and I felt that resonated with me quite a lot. I went to the doctor, said I think I might be autistic. He told me, be very careful with my words here, he told me that he would put a referral through to put me on the waiting list for an assessment. And it's funny, not funny, but funny like I'm clearly psychic or something. No, but I'm not psychic. The mental health system is predictably horrible. I mentioned in that speed build that I didn't fully trust it because I have had referrals get lost in the post many a time, and I hadn't had any confirmation letters, so I was like, I don't know if it's actually gone through, but I guess we'll see. Spoiler alert, it didn't. So I thought I'd gone on the waiting list for that. I hadn't. Found that out about a year afterwards. But that was the beginning of good things for me. Beginning to accept myself. You know, I rewrote my whole past. I came to terms with a lot of things that happened in terms of like childhood bullying, not being understood, and just generally feeling like I don't belong in the world. And 2022 was a really good summer. I'm not going to say a good year because it wasn't a good year towards the end of it, but it was a good summer. Like I said, I came to terms with the fact I was probably autistic. I started my first Uberhood and I had a blast recording that all summer, and I was in a really good space. And then September that year, I got through the mental health waiting list and I was assigned a care coordinator, and that's when everything fell apart. So without dwelling too much on the details, within a couple of weeks of being assigned a care coordinator, she managed to make a comment on my body, which is something I'm incredibly insecure about. And she didn't say anything like nasty or anything. I want to make that clear. She wasn't unkind about it. It was just a factual comment, but it's something I've always been extremely insecure about, and I've always had struggles with food and my body and stuff like that. She didn't know any of this. Mental health services to this day don't know any of this, even though they really fucking should by now. She made a comment on my body, and that triggered me to restrict my food. Now, I've been down this road many times before, throughout my teenhood, throughout my early adulthood. Generally, I just, restrict for like a month or two, lose a bunch of weight, snap out of it, and then get on with my life. Didn't happen this time, or at least it did, but not for like a year. And to begin with, it just got worse and worse and worse. I was eating less and less and less, and in case you don't know what happens when you stop eating in terms of your mental health, you get really depressed. Your brain, you can't think about anything but food. I would basically sleep like 12 hours a day because I had no energy, and the other 12 hours a day I would spend watching mukbangs and Instagram reels of fast food and doing fake grocery shopping online, where I would look at all the things that I would potentially buy. I'd look at the calorie content because I've got to know that, and decide, nah, I'm not going to buy that, knowing damn well I would never buy any of it because none of it would fit into my calorie goals. And ended up, I don't want to give actual numbers about how much weight I lost or how many calories I was eating at the worst point, or not as the case may be, because I don't want to, I know I could sit here and say, if you've struggled with eating disorders, don't listen, but I've been there, you're gonna listen anyway. So I don't want to talk numbers, and I couldn't function or think about anything. My life was terrible. I was like, okay, cool, come into the mental health system in order to become a functional person, and I am functioning worse than ever. And also I'm depressed now because my brain's just not functioning. I've got no energy at all. I was in therapy. They did give me a therapist, not for an eating disorder, but just in general. But I couldn't focus because I wasn't eating, so obviously I couldn't focus. She was helpful in some regard. She tried to help me take less blame for things. Whenever there were issues with like the system or the way the system was treating me, she was like, hey, maybe it's not all your fault. Maybe the system has some blame as well. I struggled to get my head around it though, but I had therapy sessions upstairs on the second floor. Or I'm British, aren't I? So I should say the first floor. The first floor by British standards, but even as a Brit, I can say that's a really stupid way of naming floors. It was the second floor, but I would drag myself up the stairs. I didn't have the energy hardly to just, walk up the stairs like a normal person. I had to grab the banister and like use my upper body to pull my lower body up because I couldn't do it because I had no energy. It was bad. And I have to say, I snapped out of it. I didn't require treatment or anything. It took a long time, and I definitely still have thoughts, obviously, but I ended up becoming more fixated on suicide than weight loss. So, new goal. But seriously, like it blew over. But at this point, it was a low point. So anyway, about 6 months after I was assigned a care coordinator, I was told with no planning or meeting or anything that I was being discharged. So naturally in my head, I'm like, okay, I have waited 2.5 years to access support, and I accessed support for 6 months, and everything is worse now. I reached out for help because I couldn't function like a normal adult. I couldn't find work. I couldn't look after myself. I couldn't do all of this stuff. And not only can I still not do all of that stuff, but I can do even less of that stuff because I can barely walk up a flight of stairs now. I can't do anything. I wasn't uploading videos at this time because you try making a YouTube video when you're just constantly thinking about food and when you don't even really have the energy to speak. So I was like, before mental health services got involved, I was happy. I was making my first Uberhood, and now I can't think about anything. I'm depressed. I've got no energy, and I'm still not a functional adult. It's not even like I can say I feel like shit, but at least I'm functioning. I wasn't functioning either, so everything's worse now. So I gave up. And I want to be clear, I am skimping on a lot of like nitty-gritty details because otherwise this video will be like 3 hours long, and maybe one day I will make one where I go into real nitty-gritty. I don't know, but I just don't feel like now is the time and place. There were other things that happened in this period of time, but for now I'm gonna leave it at that and say I gave up and I made serious plans to end my life. Again, skimping over details of how or what exactly happened. I was found out, had 3 trips to A&E where I was discharged each time. One of the second time, they asked me to speak to the home treatment team, who I distinctly remember the man asking me. He said, I'm a bit worried to let you go home right now in case you kill yourself. What are you going to do if I let you go home right now? And I said, I'll probably kill myself. And he said, well, anyone can say that. I could say that and then not do it for 30 years. So I'm happy to let you go home. I remember that being the one where I became the most determined I'd ever been. I made a plan, but I was determined to act on it. I was like, at this point, people are going to have to physically hold me back from doing it at this point. And I remember calling my parents and they picked me up from A&E, and I was expecting them to drive me home and I was just going to get on with it. And they refused. They didn't take me home. They just looped-de-looped and took me right back to A&E. And that third time, I got sectioned. I spent 12 days in the general hospital, and that wasn't due to needing any physical treatment. That was just because there was such a long wait to get a psych bed. I bring that up for 2 reasons. One, because I want to really drive home how long the waits are in this country at the moment. Those 12 days were split between A&E and then the admissions ward and then another general ward. But also because most of what I'm going to say in this video is quite negative towards NHS staff, but I really want to say there wasn't a single member of staff that I met in the general ward who wasn't brilliant. They were all different, and I will admit there were the odd one or two who it felt like were just there for a job, but they were still good at their job. They were still, helpful and did their best to keep me safe. But for a lot of them, they really went above and beyond, and this goes for both of the times that I spent in general, because I did go back a couple of months later, which I'll get on to. Yeah, they were lovely, and I've not got a bad word to say about them, so I want to make very clear, when I shit all over the NHS, I am talking specifically about mental health services. Physical health services definitely have a lot of funding issues and staffing issues, but the staff themselves are lovely and kind and caring and couldn't do enough for you, in my experience from what I've been through myself. So yeah, I was in the general hospital for 12 days, and then I was moved to a psych psych ward where I stayed for about 2 months. Now, near the beginning of this admission on the psych ward, they put me on an antipsychotic for some fucking reason called aripiprazole. I am not and was never psychotic, and they never claimed I was either. I was told that this antipsychotic can help with chronic depression. I've got no idea if that's true or not, but it certainly didn't help me. It made my life so much worse. I went from being suicidal because I felt like I didn't belong on this planet and I couldn't get my life together to having severe anhedonia and being unable to feel joy in anything or concentrate on anything at all. Towards the end of that 2-month admission, my mum brought my laptop onto the ward and I tried to play Sims 2 and I couldn't. You know, Sims 2 has been the love of my life since I was 12 years old, and I remember loading it up, playing like one in-game hour, checking the time, playing another in-game hour, checking the time, okay, that's been 2 minutes, okay, playing another in-game hour, checking the time, okay, that's only been 1 minute, ugh, time's going slower, you know, that's all it was to me. I'd managed to get through like half a day before I had to shut the game down because I just couldn't take it anymore. I was so bored, I didn't enjoy it anymore. I didn't enjoy anything. I would watch some TV in the evening. It would be so hard just to sit down until a break, which is what, like 10 minutes, and I would have to get up at the break because I just couldn't. And it was TV shows that I like and have liked for a long time, you know, comedy shows, Would I Lie to You, stuff like that, and I just couldn't do it. I had no interest in anything, and the staff didn't seem to believe me about this for some reason. They'd be like, oh, there must be something you used to like, and I'm like, yeah, I used to like, but I don't like anything anymore. Everything's shit. I had one member of staff tell me that she thought I was just fixated on the idea of suicide, that I wasn't giving anything a chance, and I came off that medication after about a month. And it's difficult because I feel strongly like that medication continued to fuck me up for months afterwards, but I have no proof of this. I have no evidence of this. It's just how things seem to go. At the same time as starting me on this medication, the ward tried to fast track my autism assessment. This is where I learned that it was never actually put in because they reached out to the autism clinic or whatever you'd call it and said, we want to fast track this patient's assessment, and they said, we haven't had a referral for her, so they put in a referral for me and fast tracked it. I got seen in about a month and they started that autism assessment. There was a lot of weird things going on. I mean, the assessment itself seemed fine, but then they said I wasn't autistic, and they seemed to pay no mind to the fact I was quite heavily doped up on aripiprazole. I started on quite a high dose. I can't swallow tablets very well, and the doctor told me that the one that melts in your mouth, it doesn't come on the dose they wanted to start me on, so they started me on like twice the dose they wanted. So they paid no mind to the fact I was on this drug that was flattening everything and making me have no interest in anything. And so, you know, understandably, they'd ask about interest and whether I had any intense interest or whatever, and I was just like, no, I used to, but not anymore. I'm not interested in anything anymore. So anyway, I started that autism assessment in hospital, and then I was discharged after about 2 months in hospital, so September of 2023, and I was discharged with a plan to get social care involved, because when you get sectioned on the section that I was eventually on, you're entitled to something called 117 aftercare. It means that the local council, I think, or whoever, has to pay for whatever aftercare may keep you out of hospital. So I was meant to have a social care assessment before I left hospital, actually, my understanding is. Didn't happen, but they told me they would do it after I left hospital, and they were going to put me back on the waiting list for therapy. That also didn't happen. So I stayed out of hospital for about 2 months. In that 2 months, I still couldn't find anything that I enjoyed. I tried to do everything I was told, pushed myself. I tried to re-engage with my interests. I tried to just play Sims 2 on my own, and I wasn't interested anymore. I tried to do the things I used to like, and I didn't want to, and so I spent most of that 2 months drinking, because that was the only thing that seemed to make the time go quicker, because time was so excruciatingly slow without that, and all I wanted to do was get through the day so I could get back into bed. Like I said, I'm still convinced this is side effects from the medication, even though I'd stopped taking it by this point, because I have read about antipsychotics having quite long-lasting effects sometimes, well after you stop taking them. Yeah, I was miserable. You know, I struggled even to just watch telly. I managed to stay out of hospital for 2 months. Towards the end of that 2 months, I had my result from the autism assessment. They said that I'm not autistic. They said that while I have social and communication difficulties, it's all down to depression, and while I have repetitive and restrictive interests, it's all down to anxiety. They said that I was too empathetic to be autistic. They wrote in my report at times, I don't know if they directly said it or if they just implied that I was too intelligent to be autistic, and they also said that I struggle with my sense of self, whereas autistic people tend to have a very strong sense of self, which first of all, I don't think that's true, and I don't think think the empathy thing's true either. But second of all, I don't know to this day where they got that sense of self thing from, because I don't remember discussing sense of self with them at all. I assume, rightly or wrongly, that a mental health professional told them that, and this was the first, I suppose, warning sign I had that they were probably looking at EUPD, emotionally unstable personality disorder, which I believe in other places is called borderline personality disorder, but I'll probably continue to call it EUPD. But if you know it as BPD, as far as I'm aware, it's just the same disorder with a different name, because apparently emotionally unstable personality disorder is considered less offensive than borderline personality disorder. But I know quite a bit about EUPD. I've had in the past a friend with EUPD. I looked into it for myself because, you know, I have looked at like every fucking mental illness under the sun, trying to figure out what's wrong with me over the years. I looked into it, dismissed it. I don't relate to it. I don't relate to most of the symptoms. I'm not going to say not any, because obviously, even if nothing else, the suicidal feelings and self-harm, clearly, but I don't really relate to it, so I sort of dismissed it. But I also know that mental health services will diagnose anybody with a vagina with EUPD if they can. So this was the first that I was aware that was probably what they were trying to do, because I hadn't been a quick fix, in and out of hospital and get her on some medication and she's fine now. The day after I was told that I wasn't autistic, my care coordinator, because I was assigned a new care coordinator leaving hospital, they discharged you to the community mental health team, told me that she was going to give up chasing social care. She had sent countless emails over this 2-month span and not even had excuses back. She'd had absolutely nothing back from them. So I gave up again, tried to kill myself again, got sectioned again, went back to the same ward again. It seemed like everybody was quite surprised to see me. One member of staff said to me that he was shocked to see me because it felt like we had a really good plan in my discharge last time. And I was like, yeah, we did. Unfortunately, none of it happened. Another member of staff asked me if I actually tried outside the ward to engage, you know, with hobbies I'd previously engaged in. We were talking mostly about YouTube, and I said I had, but I wasn't interested anymore. I didn't want to do YouTube anymore. I didn't want to play games anymore. I wasn't interested in anything anymore. And she said, well, maybe we need to try something else then. Maybe we need to find something else. Sort of got the impression it was a case of, maybe you're no longer interested in video games and YouTube, so we need to find you a new interest, when the reality was I'm not interested in anything, period. Like, I can't feel interest in anything. Life is, it's like I was wearing shit coloured glasses. Everything sucked. So I stayed on this ward for probably about 6 weeks before things really got worse. And like I said before, I am glossing over a lot of things. There's a lot more to get into, and like I said, maybe in the future if people are interested, and when I say in the future, I'm talking a while from now because I need to move on from this. But a lot more went on than I'm really getting into detail with here. But about 6 weeks into this admission, some things happened with members of staff where people weren't the nicest to me and a few other patients, and I made the mistake of calling it out. I said one slightly rude thing to the psychiatrist because I have no fucking sense of hierarchy, nor do I give a shit whether you're a patient or a psychiatrist. Apparently everybody else does. And when I say rude thing, I want to be very clear. I did not swear. I did not call him a name. I did not, you know, get angry. I did not... Well, what I said, I don't know why I'm dancing around. I said, I hope you're happy with yourself. I think the reason I'm dancing around it is because I'm terrified. I know it's extremely unlikely because this is a tiny YouTube channel, but I'm terrified that somebody from that ward who knows about the situation is going to come across this YouTube channel and know who I am. Why do I give a shit? Probably because I'm terrified of mental health professionals now. But yeah, I said, I hope you're happy with yourself, because there was a situation, he made another patient cry. I stood up for what I thought was right. Should I have done it with hindsight? No, because I was met with severe consequences, but I did it, and I don't regret it in that sense that he deserved it. I should have said a lot more to him. No, I shouldn't. I shouldn't have said a lot more to him because I would have been met with worse consequences, but he deserved a lot more because what I thought he was at the time was a useless twat. What I now know he is a power-hungry, useless twat who is extremely oversensitive. So I said to him, I hope you're happy with yourself, and I was moved to a different hospital. Now, I don't know what the rules are around this. I don't know if you can just move patients because they said something ever so slightly rude to a member of staff. I don't know, but I'm guessing not, because there was a lot of shadiness around why I was moved. The ward manager told me it was because of this comment I made. It's written in my notes that it was because of concerns about me building a friendship with another patient, and it was also written in my notes that it's because it was a tiny weeny bit closer to where I live. The ward I was moved to told me that it was because I had made a suicide pact with another patient, which I don't think I need to tell you is completely fabricated, but just for the record, it's completely fabricated. To this day, I've got no idea who fabricated that or where it came from, but that is what the ward I was moved to told me that they had been told, is that I was in a suicide pact with another patient. When this transfer happened, I did two things. I requested access to my notes because nobody would give me a straight answer, and I want to be clear, this transfer fucked me up. Like, I had the worst meltdown I have ever had. They didn't transfer me with any warning. They just one day said, you've got an hour, you're going to a new ward you've never been to before, you've never met anyone there before, but you go in, you've got an hour, pack your bags. Nobody told me why. Nobody gave me any warning. I had a horrible meltdown, the worst I've ever had. I was smashing my head in the wall, I was ripping my hair out in clumps, I was screaming, I was crying my eyes out for like an hour and a half. And the only reason I calmed down is because another patient asked the staff to give me some medication to help me calm down, and that's what they did because the psychiatrist had removed any PRN medication from my listed medication, so they had to call an on-call doctor. It was a whole thing. But yeah, I said some things that I regret when this happened. I want to be clear on that, but at the same time, wasn't really in control of things. I was having the biggest meltdown that I've ever fucking had, because you try being autistic and being told you've got 1 hour to pack your bags because you are being moved against your will and with no explanation from the place that you have lived on for the last 2 months and have lived on for 2 months previously to somewhere that you've never been before. This was written down in my notes as abandonment issues because, again, they were pushing for everything that could explain EUPD, and I can see why they thought that, but autistic people are notoriously bad at dealing with change, and that is a massive change with a tiny amount of notice. I think I reacted in a pretty predictable way, and it baffles me that they thought this was acceptable, but regardless. Yeah, so on the new ward, I requested access to my notes, which takes about a month for them to gather them all and send them to you, and I put in a complaint because while nobody was really telling me why I was moved, well, that was part of the complaint. The fact that it happened at all, the fact that it happened the way that it did, and then I updated this complaint when I was told a couple weeks in about this supposed suicide pact. So I was on this ward for about 3 weeks. They tried to change my medication from an antidepressant that I'd been on for about 2 weeks and hadn't really given a chance to lithium, which is most famously used for bipolar disorder, which not only do I not have, but nobody was even insinuating I had it. I refused to take lithium because I was like, I'd rather give the antidepressant some time, but they refused to change it. On this new ward, there was so much gaslighting, and I mean that in a real sense. I know that gaslighting is a word that is thrown around a lot on the internet these days of anybody who disagrees with you or is mean to you or whatever, but I mean it in the sense of people outright denying that things happened that did, or claiming that I said things that I didn't, or that I didn't say things that I did, or whatever. You know, I was told that I was refusing to take medication, and I was like, no, I'm asking for a different medication. I was told that I was refusing to see the psychologist on the ward, and I'm like, no, I'm asking to see the psychologist on the ward, and it wears you down. You know, after a while you're like, well, did I say that? Well, maybe I did say that, but I'm changing my mind. You know, if I did say I don't want to see the psychologist, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean it, I'm changing my mind. I do want to see her now. And then they go, well, you change your mind a lot. You seem a bit unstable. You seem like you've got some identity issues. You sure change your mind a lot. And I'm like, well, do I? I thought I was pretty consistent, but I guess I do. Maybe I do change my mind a lot. I told the psychiatrist, I tried to make my argument, because at this point, while nobody was diagnosing me with EUPD, they were trying to put me down the personality disorder pathway. They called it complex emotional needs. And they were trying to get me to agree to get treatment for a personality disorder without diagnosing me with a personality disorder. So I'd say to the psychiatrist, I don't want to go down the personality disorder pathway because I don't think I've got a personality disorder. You know, here is all the reasons I don't have a personality disorder. And it baffles me as well, because on the first ward that I was on, I even said when they started going down this pathway to the psychiatrist on that ward, the one who I was rude to, do you think I have EUPD? Because I don't think I do, and I'm sort of getting the idea, like I've looked up what complex emotional needs means, and I'm getting the idea that it's just a buzzword for personality disorder, and if that's what you're thinking, I want to talk about it. And he said, no, I don't think you have EUPD. You know, I can't remember exactly which symptoms it was, but I said I don't have A and B symptom, and he said, yeah, we know. You also don't have C, D, and E, so you don't have a personality disorder. We just think you've got complex emotional needs, and I was happy with that. So on the second ward, I kept saying this. I said, you know, why do you think I've got a personality disorder? And they kept saying, well, nobody's saying that you have emotionally unstable personality disorder. We just think that you might have some personality difficulties that the personality disorder service could help you with. And I was like, okay, well, what difficulties do I supposedly have? It gets just very confusing because they were so insistent that I had a personality disorder, and then when I said, so you're diagnosing me with a personality disorder, they'd go, oh no we're not, and they wrote in my notes that I spent a lot of time twisting their words, which is really fucking bold. But anyway, so that's sort of how that first admission went. They made me informal after 3 weeks, and I discharged myself and told them I was going to kill myself, and they opened the door and said, you should really start taking responsibility for yourself, which, you know, makes me feel great because I was just like, clearly nobody here cares whether I live or die. I've told people for months now that I don't want to be here, and all people have done is fuck around with my head, make decisions without me, make assumptions about me, and I'm like, well, I don't want to be here. Like, I think at this point everybody was convinced that I didn't really want to die. You know, they wrote down in my notes that it was a manipulation tactic, that I would make suicide threats in order to get what I want. Risk of suicide became risk of death by misadventure. At one point on the old ward, when I was on one-to-ones, one member of staff said to me, you know, you really need to be careful with what you're doing here, because we as staff are really good at what we do and we can really do our best to be here, but unfortunately we can't always be there and accidents do happen. So, you know, with the whole trying to kill yourself on the ward thing, you need to really think about what you want. And I remember at the time being like, what the fuck is she talking about? You know, I got the impression that she thought I was doing it for a reason other than to die. I got the impression that she was warning me against trying to kill myself because I might actually succeed. And I'm like, thanks for the pep talk, that's what I fucking want. Like, why did nobody believe me that that's what I was after? You know, I've been living on this planet now, as of recording, for 29 years. You know, at the time of everything that happened, it was 28, and I've never belonged here. I don't know whether I'm not right for the planet or it's not right for me, but I'd reached a point where I'm just like, it's never gonna work out, so I quit. And everybody seemed to think I didn't really have a reason to die. I mean, one nurse recommended me a book about a person who she said reminded her of me, because this person wanted to kill herself but didn't really feel depressed or have a reason why. And I'm like, why have a fucking reason? It's because I don't belong on this planet. Nobody wants me here. I don't want me here. It sucks. I suck. I don't know how to do the whole life thing. I quit. So yeah, they let me go when I discharged myself. They really drove home. They're like, just so you understand, you're doing this against medical advice. I'm like, against medical advice? I want to die. Like, why should I give a shit? Like, you're telling me that if I discharge myself against medical advice, I might die and you can't be held responsible. Great, I don't care anymore. They let me go. I was picked up by the police that night, taken to the place of safety suite, which is a place that they take mentally ill people who have been picked up by the police to try and keep them out of jail cells. Yeah, so I got picked up the night that I was discharged, taken to the place of safety suite. I was assessed the next day, discharged, picked up by the police again that night, taken back to the place of safety suite. I will say as well, this is probably going to sound like a surprise to people, but the police were actually quite nice to me as well. I mean, that last time they picked me up, one of them got a little bit shovey. However, I was really drunk and it was the second night in a row she'd picked me up, so I can sort of understand why. But before this point, I'd had a few encounters with the police. You know, I ran away from the psych ward a couple of times, and I also ran away from the general ward a couple of times in July. But yeah, I'd met the police a few times and they'd always been nice to me, probably nicer than the mental health professionals. So I can sort of forgive the fact that this one night one of them got a little bit physical, but it wasn't like horrible. I just hesitated and she shoved me towards the door. That's all happened. But other than that, the police were actually quite nice. Certainly the first night they picked me up, they were lovely. So yeah, they took me back to the place of safety suite, got assessed the next day, sectioned again, back on the same ward by Monday. I left on a Friday, I went back on a Monday, and about a week after, maybe 2 weeks after I got there, I got access to the notes I requested. And that's where things really started to click into place for me, because before this point, I had just sort of accepted, because I was so fixated on dying, that my life was just going to be in and out of hospital until I get suicide right. I didn't enjoy anything anymore. Everything was shit. Nothing's going to change. The system clearly isn't going to change. It's not going to help me. So I'm just going to be continuously sectioned until I get suicide right. And that was what I expected to happen. I got access to my notes. I had hundreds of pages of notes and I read through all of them in a day. Obviously, I was reading for hours and hours, but it's not like there's anything else to fucking do in a psych ward. And the penny sort of dropped reading my notes about the gaslighting and the manipulation, because I was like, oh, they've written down parts of the truth and then told me something different. And then they've written down other parts that are completely fabricated. But the thing is, they've written down the truth and the lies, and so they've contradicted themselves in their own notes. And they also wrote some quite nasty things. It was a really hard couldn't read to read my notes. It was not nice. At points it was a light bulb moment of, oh my god, this is exactly the same as a really toxic friendship I had in school, which, my mother calls emotionally abusive. At other points, it just felt like a group of bullies had congregated and written as much nasty stuff about me as they could think of and interpreted me in the worst possible lights. I also found out in these notes that I was diagnosed with a UPD, despite the psychiatrist trying to gaslight me into believing that I hadn't been and that I was twisting her words and saying that I thought I had been. It was down on paper that I was, so I sent her an email because at this point I wasn't going to do anything verbally. Everything, is going to be documented, and I still have that approach with mental health services now. Don't ever speak to anybody without documenting it. Only have conversations via emails and texts, and if I do ever have to have a face-to-face conversation with anybody again, you can bet your ass I'm going to record it because I don't trust a single word anymore. So I emailed her and told her, please could you either send me the report of where I was assessed for and diagnosed with this personality disorder, or remove it from my records. And she removed it from my records. I'm assuming that it was only put on there because I don't hit the criteria. I'm assuming it was only put on there as an effort to shut me up because I was starting to put in complaints, and you can't trust a borderline. You can't trust what they say because they just complain and they split on people and they idealize and then devalue people. So just dismiss her complaints because she's just going to devalue us and split the teams or whatever. And clearly the disorder is a lot more complicated than that, and clearly there are people who actually do struggle with the disorder. However, it's also clear that many people, when I say people I mean majority women, are misdiagnosed with it deliberately. It's sort of a known thing in hospitals. On the first ward that I was on, a few patients said to me, don't get diagnosed with a UPD, don't do X, Y and Z, don't argue with the staff, don't try and kill yourself, don't self-harm, you will get diagnosed with a UPD and you don't want that. It was a known thing among patients, again, female patients, that they will slam this diagnosis on you and you do not want that. It will ruin your life and you will never be trusted again. And I thought that was probably what was happening with me, but I mistakenly thought that if I called it out and was honest, people would be honest with me. They weren't. They diagnosed me without telling me, which, regardless of anything else, I think is just more evidence that they never believed I had it, because surely if they believed I had it, telling a patient that you believe they have X, Y and Z symptoms is step one of recovery, right? Like, what is the point in diagnosing a disorder and then not telling a patient about it? Makes no fucking sense, right? So anyway, she removed the diagnosis. I got access to these notes, and to begin with, I felt worse, because to begin with, I was like, I can't get any help from this system. Yes, I'm seeing that I'm not the whole problem now. Yes, I'm seeing how nasty and vindictive things have been. However, I still feel like absolute shit. So I still was on the suicide train, effectively. But I found some information online, and I will link to this in the description below in case anybody does resonate with this story. And this is partially why I'm sharing this, is because I was helped by reading other people going through similar experiences, like in blog posts and stuff, which is what I'll be linking in the description. I'm not affiliated with any of them or anything like that, but they just genuinely helped me at this moment. And so I feel like adding my voice as another person, maybe if anybody listening to this happens to need it at this moment in time or whatever, to realise that actually the system is manipulative and can be quite nasty at times. And I'm not saying, by the way, that every mental health professional is vindictive and nasty and abusive. That's not the case. But the odd one that is gets away with it because of the way the system is set up. And the system is also set up to make good people do bad things. It's set up to oppress patients, in particular women. So yeah, I found these blogs and they made me realise a little bit what had been going on and how nasty everything was. And at this point I decided, okay, I'm about halfway through my section at this point, because I was only on a section 2 at this point, whereas in previous admissions I was put on a section 3. I was like, I'm just going to keep my head down. I know this ward will discharge me quite quickly. Keep my head down. I'm going to stay away from the staff because I can't trust them. I'm going to stay away from the patients because people keep misinterpreting my actions with patients, and I'm just going to keep to myself. And I spent that whole week playing Mario on the Switch, which feels like a not important detail, but I would play it for hours. I don't exactly know what point it clicked, but at some point throughout these months I was able to enjoy things again. I don't know if it was a case of side effects from the antipsychotic began to wear off around this time, and so I was able to concentrate and enjoy things like games again. That I don't know, but around this time I started picking up my Switch and playing some games. Kept to myself in my room, kept my head down, said as little as possible to anybody, and got on with it. And sure enough, about a week later, I was told by the psychiatrist that I was again being made an informal patient. I decided to discharge myself immediately because why the fuck would I want to stay there? She asked me, she goes, well, what's the hurry to leave? I'm like, why the fuck would I... What do you mean, what's the hurry? Like, I'm sorry, yeah, I just want to stay here for a bit longer, like, what? And I said to her, I'm pretty sure I said, like, why would I want to stay here? But anyway, I said to her, it's not going to be like last time. I'm not necessarily going to walk out and kill myself. I said, I'm going to apply for PIP, which is a benefit here in the UK, a disability benefit. I'm going to apply for PIP. I'm going to pay for some private counselling because by this point, my care coordinator had already told me she wasn't going to let me have any more therapy because she said, and I quote, you can get too reliant on therapy. She said this in front of a room full of professionals, myself and my mother, and continues to deny it. But regardless, I said I'm going to pay for some private counselling because it didn't end up being therapy, it was counselling, and I'm going to pay for a private autism assessment. And she goes, you know, good for you. It sounds like you're finally starting to take some responsibility for yourself. Swear to fucking God, could have punched her. But at this point, I was just like, you know what did I expect? Of course, when I'm telling people, you haven't helped me, you've done fuck all to help me, and I'm going to have to fork out thousands of my own money, or at least when I say my own money, I mean money that comes from the government purse in another way, thanks for absolutely fucking nothing. And the interpretation of that is, well done, the patient's taking responsibility. Like, why the fuck does mental health services not take responsibility? I don't know. So they let me go. My mum picked me up, took me home. This was March last year, so this was a year ago. I went home feeling like things could work out now because I was aware that I was able to enjoy things again because I'd been playing my Switch for the last week or so, and it felt like there was a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, things might improve. I had an ongoing complaint with PALS, who are the patient advice and liaison service, or in other words, a heap of shit, but I'll get onto that shortly. But at this point, I was like, you know, maybe PALS will do something, they'll improve the system, they'll hear me, you know, I've got my notes now, I've got all the evidence that what I said happened is true, because if they don't, somebody's gonna fucking die in one of these wards, and I'm gonna be the one to raise awareness of what is going on, and I'm gonna stop that happening. You know, things are gonna be okay now. I'm gonna get back into YouTube, I'm gonna take a week or two to myself, and I'm gonna get right back into YouTube because I'm mentally ill, and I've been told that the best way through mental illness is to just push on. I'm gonna do the things that I couldn't do last time because of the side effects of the antipsychotics that I was put on for no fucking reason, and I'm gonna start my YouTube channel again, start Uberhood number 2, and that's what I did. So I spent March and April playing through the university households in my Uberhood, ready for a May start of re-uploading. Now, even March and April were rough. Even though I was outside of hospital at this point, I was again discharged back to the community mental health team. You're supposed to get after discharge a 7-day follow-up appointment or phone call or anything, and the first time I was discharged from hospital, I did get that. The second time, I clearly didn't because I was readmitted within a couple of days, so it wasn't necessary. This third time, it didn't happen. I was told my care coordinator would contact me for my 7-day follow-up appointment. This is supposed to keep you out of hospital. It's supposed to check in that everything's okay. Didn't get a 7-day follow-up phone call for my last admission to hospital. So I just thought, okay, cool, my care coordinator, as usual, is being useless, whatever. 3 weeks in, I had a letter saying that I was going to get discharged from community mental health care, which sent me all in a tailspin because I had at this point really lowered my expectations, but this was lower than even I was expecting, to be discharged without even a phone call. So I sent a text saying how unhappy I was. She replied, all fake nice, saying she was really glad I've reached out and she'd make an appointment, and I said, just don't bother, just discharge me, I don't care anymore. Because at this point, I'm like, you know what, I'm probably better off on my own, outside of the chaos and fuckery of the system. And spoiler alert, I was right. And I was discharged from community mental health care, having had no correspondence or appointments since leaving hospital. And it was a rough couple of months in that like spring, early summer, trying to figure out how to go it alone. But I've got a really supportive family, which mental health services say that I'm emotionally abusing, and my family say that I'm not, but that's a whole other thing that I should probably gloss over because again, maybe one day I'll make a much longer video going really into it, and then we can discuss mental health services attempts to split me from my own support system. But regardless, I have a really supportive family and I'm so grateful, and I know I'm so lucky for that. Yeah, I was discharged from community mental health care, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna try and move past it, get on with my Uberhood, you know, get on with my YouTube channel. I started uploading in May. I put in a new complaint because I'd already complained about inpatient care, convinced that somebody was going to die there, and I was decided to put in a complaint about outpatient care, about the community mental health team and social care fuckery as well. Because by the way, I forgot to mention, I did eventually get a social care assessment in February of 2024, which was 5 months after I was discharged the first time. They wrote an assessment of my needs and a report of my needs, again, February 2024, so a little over a year ago. I'm yet to actually see any support. They seem to have done the assessment, said what I need to keep me out of hospital. I was readmitted twice, so they didn't do a very good job of keeping me out of hospital, and despite being now a year out from being in hospital at all, still got no support to keep me out of hospital. System is broken. My social worker hasn't even replied to the last fucking text I sent him a month ago, which is interesting because I was reassigned a few times, but I've now circled right back to the first one I had in autumn of 2023 that my care coordinator couldn't get a hold of. So I can see her issue now is you can't get a hold of him, he just doesn't reply. So I've given up hope that anybody's going to fucking help, but I don't give a shit anymore. So yeah, discharged from the community mental health team, put in a complaint about them to add to my inpatient complaint, because I really thought at this point maybe the complaints people will do something about this, fix something. I can't be the only one. Maybe it's just a case that nobody else has complained, because I was still delusional at this point, I suppose, that all you need to change the system is to speak out about it. So I started uploading my Uberhood again in May. A week after the first video went up, somebody died on the ward, and it's a weird thing because it was somebody I knew. She'd been there a very long time. She was there throughout both of my admissions. It was the first ward I was on, so I sort of knew her for about 4 months in total, but we were never like close. I know I posted on my YouTube channel that my friend has died, but it's always a weird thing on the ward because it wasn't somebody who I got close to enough to really call a friend, but at the same time, because it's such a confined space, everybody's sort of in everybody's business and knows everything about everybody, so I know things about her that probably some of her closest friends maybe don't know, but at the same time, I didn't really know her. You know, I'd started counselling at this point with a private counsellor, and it was my second session with her because I started with her only a matter of days before this happened as well. So it was my second session with her, and I told her about it, and she did all the grief counselling things of, you know, tell me about your favourite memory with her, you know, tell me what she was like. And I was like, I don't have a favourite memory. We were in hospital the whole time. I don't really know what she was like, you know. I associate her a lot with Christmas because during my admission throughout December in 2023, she'd have her bedroom door open a lot singing Christmas songs, and the Pogues song is particularly hard for me at the moment, and it may be hard for me forever to hear because that one is so closely tied to her. But I also feel like such a drama queen for being upset about it because I didn't really know her that well, but I also lived with her for 4 months, so it's a very strange situation to understand how much I'm actually allowed to feel sad. So I tried to just carry on with my Uberhood. I took a few days to, you know, collect myself and gather myself together, and then I just got on with it because I was like, we weren't close, so I shouldn't be affected. But I do think now with hindsight there's also a lot of survivor's guilt, because even though we weren't close, I do feel quite bad that she didn't get to leave. So anyway, that was May last year, and then July last year the inpatient component of my complaint came through, and they basically said nothing wrong happened. They spoke to the professionals involved and they confirmed it didn't happen. Apparently they also looked at my notes to see that it didn't happen. The things that I'm saying were told that weren't true, such as the suicide pact lie, did happen, and that was definitely true. I spent all week compiling my notes because I wanted to show them. I was like, maybe they just haven't seen my notes or something, I don't know. So I compiled my notes, giving evidence to back up everything I was saying and working against stuff the professionals were saying, to say, you know, what I'm saying is true, what they are saying is false, and here is the evidence that they wrote to prove it. And I also, because the suicide pact thing worried me so much, because encouraging somebody to commit suicide is illegal, and I googled it and it's not clear how it works with suicide pacts, but my understanding is that is technically illegal. But the worry still is to a certain extent, that if the other person accused in this suicide pact does successfully kill themselves, that I'm going to get into legal trouble. So alongside compiling evidence of all my notes, I said basically, you know, you're going to have to do something about the suicide pact lie, or else I may be forced to pursue other avenues. I basically told them that I might take legal action if they don't change that in my notes. So they responded to that, saying that none of it mattered, that they read all my notes. I think the word they used was they read all of my notes, they took the professional's word and my word and then used the balance of probabilities to decide the truth, which I think just means professionals can do no wrong, patients can do no right, but whatever. I guess professionals are allowed to just change their version of events despite writing down what happened months prior, and even if what's written down aligns with what the patient is saying, the professional's revised version is true now. But the one win I did get, I suppose, is that they did say, okay, fair enough, we were wrong about the suicide pact, we've changed that now. Now, I don't trust them that they actually have, but I've kept the email just in case it's important legally one day, which I hope it's not, because I don't want anyone else to die. I hope it's not ever relevant, but if it does become relevant one day, I just need my ass covered, because I don't know how far they'll take it. So I've got that email where they've admitted to being wrong, I've got my notes, and I'm just trying to cover myself. So yeah, this was July, and that really fucked me up as well, because I really thought that the complaints people were going to help. I really thought they were going to be unbiased. I mean, I knew that PALS was not an independent organisation. I knew that they were part of the NHS, but I didn't realise that they would be so biased that they would outright say, despite evidence being there, that they were still in the right. That fucked me up all summer, and around this point, my Uberhood really went off track. I stopped uploading. I couldn't, focus on it, because it's very difficult to get your head around when people are outwardly telling you, despite you handing them evidence, that you're still in the wrong. You really start to believe it, and my head was a real mess all summer of maybe I am a horrible person, maybe I am X, Y, and Z, unless it was something that I could without a doubt say wasn't true, like the suicide pact, or like a tangible, literal thing that I either know happened or didn't. When it's about my character, or things that maybe it didn't feel as important to me that I don't remember as well, you spend a lot of time questioning your reality of things. What happened, what didn't happen, I don't really know. I was still in counselling at this time. I can't afford an actual therapist like a psychologist, but I was seeing a counsellor, and she helped in the sense that, she did give me some practical things to help, but she also helped in the sense that when I was talking about all of this stuff, she was just like, they're narcissists, that's abusive, you're an abuse victim, you've been gaslit, you've been manipulated. And it's sometimes just hearing somebody say that who is outside of the situation helps you believe it a bit more, because it's very difficult to know what reality is when you're being gaslit so much and by so many people who are supposed to be professionals. So I saw that counsellor for a few months. That's sort of all I needed, to be told that, I'm not in the wrong here, and that actually I have been mistreated. I also paid for a private autism assessment. I'm down about £2,000 between the autism assessment and the counselling, and that autism assessment, I met them a few times through September and October, and not only did the assessor say you are clearly autistic, but she held her head in her hands at points when I described what the previous autism assessors had said and done. She seemed somewhat in disbelief at some of their reasoning for me not being autistic. So for example, at one point they said I can't be autistic because I've taken an interest in psychology and sociology through school and college and stuff, because autistic people wouldn't show that much interest in other people. And my private assessor was actually, I think she said 50% of the people she sees have studied psychology and sociology, because it's such a common thing for autistic people, because they don't have that innate knowledge, that they just study it in textbooks instead. So she was sort of baffled that they'd use things like that as a reasoning for me not being autistic, when she was actually looking at it as a reason why I probably am. So I got diagnosed with autism at the end of October. I thought it was going to be a light bulb moment, and it really wasn't, because I've been through so much since. I think it might have been if that had come first. And probably my biggest regret is going to mental health services at all. I should have just gone on PIP and paid privately for this assessment 5 years ago, or however many years ago when I first thought about it, but I didn't. And so it's been a few months, and it's been a struggle to come to terms with and accept. And to begin with, I still said things like I might be autistic, or if I'm autistic, because it sort of felt like, okay, I've had one no and one yes, so that's now a 50-50 toss-up. I've got a 50% chance of being autistic. And I even considered getting more opinions as if I can just throw money away. I considered getting more opinions to sort of do a best of 5. I was like, that's how it feels like. It feels like I need to change these odds from 50-50 and get something more solid, do a best of 5, just to make the odds more clear one way or another. But my family have been really supportive and tried to convince me that I am autistic, and I think I am sort of believing that now and getting my head around that now, and doing what I started doing in 2022 before mental health services got involved and back when I was happy, which is figure figuring out my past and putting that all into context, all the bullying, all the misunderstandings, putting that all back into context like I did in 2022, because the NHS service threw that all out of context and confused the hell out of me. So I'm sort of figuring that out and figuring out how to move on. I got my complaint response for outpatient treatment a week or two ago, and that was just as terrible, exactly the same as the first one. Mental health services did nothing wrong, you did everything wrong. Blah. It's definitely knocked me. Again, not as much as the first time because I was expecting it this time, so I knew that it wasn't going to be a nice read, so it's like it's taken a few days, whereas last time took a few months. And that brings me on to my current Uberhood. I know I've gone on a lot about a lot of things, and I know that it may not feel relevant, but I really feel like I need to start fresh again, because last year I thought I was starting fresh, moving on from mental health services, but then they continued to fuck with me for a few more months, and it was all so new. I think I rushed into it a bit quickly, but then to be fair, I didn't know that there was going to be more to come, so it feels important to start a new Uberhood now. I am in a better place. I know I've done a lot of crying in this video, it's because this is really hard to talk about, but I want to share it because, like I said earlier, I know I'm not the only one. I know this is a thing that's happening, and I felt like the only one, with the exception of the odd blog that I found. It feels like you're the only one because mental health services do such a good job at gaslighting people and manipulating people that they don't talk a lot of the time, and frankly, a lot of people don't talk because a lot of people don't survive. But I did, for better or for worse, so I feel like it needs to be said, because I've tried talking to the system, I tried talking to professionals directly, and I've tried talking to the complaints process, and they don't listen. And so now I'm gonna just try talking in general to anybody who'll listen, because I almost lost my fucking life, and I wasn't even mentally ill, and that's the real thing. You know, I've been told my whole life, like I said at the beginning of this video, that I'm mentally ill, and it was just autism all along, whereas now I think I might be mentally ill because I have nightmares and experiences that I don't know if it fits into the definition of a flashback or what, but I'm having symptoms that I wasn't having before, and I suspect that I might have PTSD, but clearly I'm never going to know for sure because I'm never going to get diagnosed or treated, because I'm never going back to that hellhole of a system. So I'm just going to have to live with that now. I'm sort of accepting I am a different person than I was now. I do have this much more negative and cynical outlook on the world, and I'm always going to have these doubts about whether I'm a good person or whether, you know, I deserved everything that happened, or whether anything even happened at all. Maybe it's all just in my head and I'm just crazy, and maybe none of it's real. And that's why it's so difficult to talk about, is because I've always got this voice in the back of my head saying none of this is real, none of this actually happened. But that's what happens when you get gaslit, is you doubt yourself persistently. On a lighter note, going back to the Uberhood, I know that it's going to be annoying if you have been around for a while to rewatch some of the same families, and there is no expectation for you to watch any of it, to be clear. If you want to skip the families I've already posted before, or if you just don't want to watch it at all because you're sick of seeing Pleasant View, like, that's fine. No hard feelings. I totally get it. You know, use your free time in whatever way makes you happy. But I feel, in terms of me posting, this is just what I want to do, is start again, have a fresh slate. I'm not fully away from everything that happened because I don't think I ever will be, but I'm away from it enough in the sense that I'm no longer actively in it. And so I think I can now figure out a way to be more consistent, because that's the other thing, is being diagnosed with autism, as well as other things like putting into context my past. It also allows me to work with myself rather than against myself, because under mental health services they do a whole lot of trying to get you to work against yourself in the name of recovery. If you think something, that's a wrong thought. If you feel something, that's a wrong feeling. If you're doing something, you're probably doing it wrong, because if you were doing it right, you wouldn't feel the way you do. Try harder. Take more responsibility. And actually working with myself as an autistic person, a lot of it is doing the complete opposite of what mental health services have told me to do. It's not about trying harder, it's about trying smarter. And actually, if I need to take a break, it's about taking a break. But I think I'm sort of getting there, and I think that I might be able to do the Uberhood better this time because of it. And hopefully, touch wood, not taking months-long breaks. So I hope all of that clears things up. I was expecting to talk for about 20 minutes, and I've talked for about an hour and a half. So I should say, if I can't cut this down significantly, you've probably seen me build all 6 apartments, and most of them are the same thing, so I apologise. So new Uberhood coming this week. To begin with, it will be very similar to the old one, clearly, but hopefully we can get through the Pleasant View families, move on to something new, start afresh, and yeah, if you want to stick stick around for that. I really appreciate that. And if you're new here, I'm sorry this is the first video you've had to see. I swear I don't cry in all of them. Whether you've been here before or not, I would really appreciate if you stick around. And if you don't want to stick around but want to come back later, that's absolutely fine as well. I look forward to seeing you then. But that's it for now, I think. Yeah, I suppose I'll end this video here. So if you were here, thank you for watching. If you made it at the end of this video, seriously, thank you for watching, because I feel like it's going to be really, really long. And it's been a heavy one. So yeah, thank you. The next episode on this channel will be episode 1 of the Uberhood, which will be the scripted events episode. And then we're going to rush through the university episodes, if I can get my shit together and record them, or at least finish recording them. So yeah, thank you for watching. I forgot my outro, but I will see you soon.